Next up is the VirtuaNES. Alright, I'm going to test out the non-patched Famicom ROM. And it looks perfect. Alright, so now I'll find out what it looks like after defeating the first boss. Alright, now I'm going to see what it looks like. It looks like it's in line with the FCEUX. Unfortunately, this is the only way I can record, unfortunately. I tried my best to get AVI video of this, but I couldn't. Now, the translated ROM is sometimes problematic, but I'm going to see if it works here. And it does. Alright, so I'm going to see what it looks like after defeating the first boss. Alright, let's see what it looks like. Yep, and it's still in line with the FCEUX. So far, 0-2 for VirtuaNES. Alright, now for the patched. This is the Famicom ROM. Patched up with the MMC1 patch. And it looks good so far. I'm going to see what it looks like after defeating the first boss. Alright, I'm going to grab the item here and see what it looks like. And it works perfectly! It's definitely a step up over the FCEUX. But there's still one more round to go. Now for the patch translated ROM of VirtuaNES. This has usually been good with most of the NES emulators I've tried so far. Let's see if this is one of them. So far, so good. Okay, gonna see what it looks like after defeating the first boss. Alright. It's time to find out. And it works! It works! This is definitely a step up over the FCEUX. VirtuaNES went 2 for 4 with the 4 ROMs that I tried of Holy Diver. VirtuaNES did surprise me, even though it really didn't work when I tried to record any footage of Holy Diver. But what I did record did shock me, and I was surprised once I tried the non-patched ROMs of Holy Diver. I really thought that VirtuaNES was going to be in line with the FCEUX. But once I tried the patched ROMs of Holy Diver, that all changed. As the patched ROMs of Holy Diver worked perfectly without any graphical glitches whatsoever. VirtuaNES is not as good as Mesen or the Nestopia emulator, but it's definitely higher quality than the FCEUX and probably even the NES Classic Edition. Next up is the BizHawk. Alright, try the pan first. We're going to see what it looks like. Most of the time, there's no complaints when it comes to graphics, and it looks good. So now I'm going to find out what it looks like after defeating the first boss. Alright, let's test it. Probably going to be a little slow because I'm capturing the video. And look at that! So far, BizHawk is 1-on-1. No glitches whatsoever. Alright, for the translated ROM. so far so good. No glitches whatsoever. As some NES simulators that I've tried do have graphical glitches enough that makes the translated non-patched version of Holy Diver unplayable. So now I'm going to see what it looks like after defeating the first boss. Alright, it's time to check. And look at that, it works perfectly. So BizHawk so far 2 and 2. Let's make it 3 for 3. See if patched, translated, and Famicom ROMs work perfectly. Alright, the MMC1 hack patch, the Famicom version, so far nothing. I haven't had a problem with this. So, let's see what it looks like when I defeat the first boss. Alright, let's see if we can make it 3 for 3. And look at that! BizHawk is 3 for 3! Can this be the first NES emulator to have a perfect score and play every single one without any graphical glitches whatsoever? Got one more round to test. Here we go, the last one. So far so good. No glitches. Gonna find out once I beat the first boss, see how it actually is. Will it be 4 for 4? Alright, moment of truth. Will this be the first emulator to play all 4 ROMs without any problems at all? Here it is. And there you go! The first emulator to play all 4 ROMs without any problems. It's beating out Nestopia. It's the BizHawk. So far is the best emulator that I've tried. Question is, will we have another emulator that will get this perfect score of 4 for 4? Will the next emulators that I try, will they play all 4 ROMs without any problems? I'll have to find out. BizHawk was perfect when it came to all 4 ROMs of Holy Diver. I didn't have a single graphic glitch with any of the ROMs that I tried. It was perfect. It did better than Nestopia. And if you want an emulator that plays Holy Diver perfectly, no matter if it's a patched version or not, BizHawk is definitely for you. But I still got more emulators to test. Next up is Nemulator. Now there's one cool thing about Nemulator that I do really like, and that's this layout. This is a pretty cool layout, and I do really like this about Nemulator. Now I'm going to test out the Famicom non-patched ROM first. And unfortunately I gotta use the keyboard, which sucks. And I already know that for a fact because I tried this before I even filmed this. And as you can see, it is perfect. Alright, so you're going to find out what it looks like after I defeat the first boss. Alright. Moment of truth. Here we go. And look at that. It actually works perfectly without any problems whatsoever. But I still got 3 more rounds to try. Alright, this is the translated ROM. See if this works properly. And it does, at least this part of it does. And I gotta see what it looks like after defeating the first boss. Alright. It's time to test out. See if it works. And it does. Look at that. No problems whatsoever. So both non-patched versions of Holy Diver are perfectly working. 2 out of 2 for any emulator. Alright, now time for the patched Famicom ROM. See if that works perfectly. Well, I've never had any problems with the beginning of the stage here, so. But I gotta see how it is after defeating the first boss. Alright, now for the test. See if it works perfectly with this. I gotta make sure. There we go. And it doesn't. Holy cow! It does not work perfectly with the patched ROM. So that means that so far only the non-patched versions of Holy Diver work. Alright, 1 more to go. That's the patched translated ROM. Okay. Alright. Test out this sucker, see if it works. So far so good at this part, but I still gotta play and try to beat the first boss. And then I'll see how everything works and see if it works perfectly. Alright, I'm going to see if it's going to be the same result as the patched Famicom ROM, or could it be a coincidence? I don't know. I'm going to test it out right now. Alright. And no, it is the same. So, whatever's not patched of Holy Diver works perfectly, but when it comes to patched, the MMC1 hack patch does not work on this thing. So surprisingly enough, you don't even have to do the patch for Holy Diver on this thing, or for this thing I should say. It works perfectly otherwise. So, oh well, nothing I can do about that. Well, the Nemulator, surprisingly enough, you don't have to patch Holy Diver at all. You can simply play Holy Diver without any patches whatsoever. It worked perfectly on the Nemulator, and I was completely surprised. I didn't even expect it. The only problem with the Nemulator, unless of course someday I can figure out how to set up this one particular thing that I wanted to use, I had to use the keyboard to play Holy Diver, unfortunately. I wasn't able to use the USB gamepad that I bought. Unless, of course, there is a way to do so. If you know for a fact, or if you know how to do it, and know how to set up the USB gamepad so that way I can play it on the emulator, please let me know. But I do know for a fact that so far I'm not able to play on my USB gamepad. Unless, of course, there is a way, I just don't know it yet. Hopefully someday I'll figure that out, unless there is no other option. So far, only the keyboard I can use, and that to me is a deal breaker. But I was surprised about the non-patched versions working perfectly. I was completely surprised about that. But I just wish, and I really wish, that I would have been able to use the USB gamepad. That is my only gripe with this emulator, is that I'm not able to use the USB gamepad. I wish there was an option for that. But I got one emulator left, and I'm going to test that out right now. And finally, Nintendulator. Alright, now it's time to test out the non-patched Famicom ROM. Now with this I have to go to CPU and hit run. Unfortunately. That kind of sucks, but I have no choice. Play it. See if there's any glitches. And this is a little bit slower than some of the NES emulators that I've used. And so far no glitches, so I'm going to see what it looks like after I defeat the first boss. Alright, time to test, see if it works. And look at that! Holy cow! This is the not patched Famicom ROM. And it powers on. It works perfectly. I shouldn't say powers on, but it works perfectly. No problem at all. Okay. This sometimes has been known to have problems on certain emulators. Works perfectly so far. I just have to see what it looks like after I defeat the first boss. Alright. Let's see if Nintendulator becomes maybe the second one to have a perfect score. I don't know. Find out about this. So far, 2 for 2. Nintendulator's 2 for 2. And it was just like that with the N emulator. But could it go downhill in the next round? Gotta try the patched Famicom and translated versions. Alright, now it's time for the patched ROMs. I have to hit run. The only bad thing about Nintendulator is you have to hit run to actually play the game. Or start the game, I should say. So far, so good. I haven't had any problems whatsoever with this. Well, gotta find out what it's gonna look like after defeating the first boss. Alright, let's see if Nintendulator can be 3 for 3. And look at that, Nintendulator's 3 for 3. Yeah, it worked. It worked right there perfectly. No glitches whatsoever. Could this be the second emulator to go 4 for 4, just like BizHawk? One more ROM coming up. Alright, the last ROM I'm going to test. Could it be another emulator that goes 4 for 4? It has a 50-50 shot. Has so far no glitches. I have to find out after defeating the first boss. See if Nintendulator can go 4 for 4. Alright. Will Nintendulator go 4 for 4? Is this it? Will it be the second emulator to go 4 for 4? This is the final test. The final round I'm going to test. Alright, here we go. And it did! It did! It joins BizHawk as the only other emulator that worked with Holy Diver. All 4 rounds. It worked perfectly. Nintendulator surprised me. I didn't expect it to actually perform as well as it did. The only problem with Nintendulator was the performance of it. It was actually quite slow. But besides that, Holy Diver worked perfectly. On all 4 rounds, I didn't have a single problem. Just like with BizHawk, this worked perfectly as well. But I feel that BizHawk did better than Nintendulator. But Nintendulator is another good option that you may want to consider if you want to play Holy Diver, because Holy Diver worked perfectly on it. And it's the last emulator that I tried. So next up, I'm going to rank every single emulator that I tried, and I'm going to do my top 11, and it's going to be from worst to best. Alright, now it's time for the ranking of every single NES emulator, and I am putting Nestopia and FCEUX on this list as well, since I did try those in the last video. Now, number 11 goes to the N emulator, and the only reason why I'm putting that at the bottom of this list is because of this. I wasn't able to play Holy Diver at all using this. If there is a way to use this on an emulator, please let me know. And if there is a way, then I might rank an emulator a lot higher in a future video. But for right now, it stays at number 11 because I was only able to use the keyboard and not one of these, which is a big disappointment in my opinion. And it was essentially a deal breaker for me. Had it been able to use one of these, I probably would have ranked the emulator a lot higher, since surprisingly enough, it allowed me to play Holy Diver without any problems whatsoever, at least with the non-patched versions. The patched versions, however, had glitches. That's the only thing about an emulator that was a problem, besides not be able to use one of these. So an emulator goes at the bottom of this list at number 11. Now my top 10, of course, allowed me to use the USB gamepad. If I was doing this by performance, then an emulator would be higher on this list. And my number 10 would definitely be number 11. Because what I'm putting at number 10, of course, I feel is the worst emulator that you can try. And that's the Jnes. And that is because I tried Holy Diver, and unfortunately only 2 of the ROMs worked. And not for the best. Because the only 2 that worked were the patched versions, and unfortunately had the same problem as the FCEUX. So as a result, I do not recommend Jnes. If you want a better emulator, I steer away from Jnes. Number 9, of course, goes to the Rock NES, and that is because it performed the same way as the FCEUX, and it was much slower, and that's the only reason why I'm putting it lower than the FCEUX, and that's because it was slower and didn't perform as well as the FCEUX, and it had the same problems as the FCEUX. So my number 9, of course, goes to Rock NES. Number 8, of course, goes to the FCEUX, like I talked about with the Rock NES. But the FCEUX performs much faster than the Rock NES, so that's the reason why it's a lot higher. But it still has the same problems even with newer versions. And sadly, there hasn't been a newer version in quite a bit of time. So until the people that programmed the FCEUX come back and make a newer version, the FCEUX is at my number 8. Number 7, of course, goes to the Higan. And the big reason why for that is because even though it does not work with every single Famicom or translated ROM of Holy Diver, it works with the patched versions, and they work perfectly. And that's the big reason why it is higher on this list, is because once you patch the translated or the Japanese Famicom ROM of Holy Diver, you will get an experience by Higan that you didn't expect with the FCEUX. And until the FCEUX gets it right, I'm putting Higan higher on this list. Now my number 6 unfortunately failed to make the top 5, and unfortunately I had to do it. And I'm talking about the NES Classic Edition. And that's just because it does not work with the non-patched versions of Holy Diver. However, it does work with the patched versions. So if you want to play Holy Diver on the NES Classic Edition, definitely patch your ROMs. I will say that. And I find that this to be better than the Higan. So as a result, the NES Classic Edition is my number 6. And I find the quality to be much better too. So number 6, of course, NES Classic Edition. Alright, let's get to my number 5. Number 5, of course, goes to the Virtual NES. Now, even though it's problematic when you play non-patched versions of Holy Diver, either they're translated or Japanese ROMs, if you patch either one of those, they will work perfectly on the Virtual NES. No problem. And that's the big reason why it's number 5 on this list. It definitely did much better than the NES Classic Edition and the Higan. So as a result, I had to put Virtual NES at my number 5. Now my number 4 goes to the Mesen. And the only reason why I didn't rank this higher than Nestopia is because it runs basically the same way as Nestopia. It works with 3 out of the 4 ROMs that I tested. The only one that it did not work with is the non-patch translated version of Holy Diver. And it has the same problem as Nestopia, in which it's so glitched that the game is unplayable. But once you patch the translated ROM, you will get an experience of the translated version that you did not expect. So the Mesen is my number 4. Number 3, of course, goes to Nestopia. And I talked about it with the Mesen. It has the same problem with the Mesen, but I like Nestopia to this day. It works almost perfectly, and the only ROM that it did not work perfectly with Holy Diver is the translated patched version of Holy Diver. But once you patch that, it shouldn't be any problem. So Nestopia, number 3. And it's definitely well worth having if you have not tried Nestopia for yourself. My top 2 picks, of course, surprise and upsets. They beat out Nestopia for the best performance and overall. And they played all 4 ROMs perfectly of Holy Diver. But I had to put one as my number 2. And I had to put the Nintendulator as my number 2. The only reason why for that is because the performance on that was a little slow. And my number 1, of course, easily goes to BizHawk. No question, it wasn't even close. And that's just because it performed perfectly. It worked with all 4 ROMs, had no graphical glitches whatsoever, and I played each game without any problems whatsoever. It wasn't slow, it wasn't fast, it was perfect. So no question about it, BizHawk wins. It's definitely the best emulator to play Holy Diver on. And I definitely highly recommend that you check it out for yourself. Now, I also tried Android NES emulators as well. Unfortunately, most of those perform the same way as the FCEUX, so I don't really recommend them that much, and some of them, of course, you have to pay for. So no question about it, if you want an NES emulator to try, definitely check out the ones that are for free. That I do recommend. Now, nothing beats playing Holy Diver on original hardware, but if you can't afford the money and play Holy Diver on official hardware, this video should be helpful for you. I definitely picked out the best emulator to try with Holy Diver, and that's definitely BizHawk, and there's other emulators as well. The emulators that I do recommend, I definitely recommend the NES Classic Edition, but I also told you that I recommend BizHawk, and I also recommend Nestopia as well. Nintendulator I kind of recommend, but it's a little slow. But if you can find, it might be just the performance of the computer that I was using. It might actually perform better on your computer. So definitely try it for yourself. So that's all I really gotta say, and I hope this video was helpful for you. If you want to play Holy Diver on an NES emulator, this video was definitely for you. And I thank you all for watching. And I'll catch you next time for another Video Game Chronicles video. Happy gaming.